Sponsor display ads are the only ad type that puts your product directly underneath your competitors' buy box and underneath their bullet points. But I talk to sellers all the time who are not sure how to use this ad type because they don't know how to set them up. In this video, I'm going to be walking you through how to set up a sponsor display ad start to finish. We're going to hop into a screen share. I'm going to show you what settings you should be using and also which ones you want to make sure that you avoid if you want to make the most out of this ad type. So at the end of this video, you will have all the tools you need to go in and set up your own sponsored display campaigns. So what we're going to do is you need to go into your account, navigate here to advertising, and we're going to go into campaign manager. So to set up these, what you want to do is click create campaign. Once you're inside the campaign creation tool, we're going to go here to sponsored display. Now, if you want to sort of see where these ads show up, a lot of different things, you can look at this slideshow, also got some more information here, but don't worry, I'm going to be covering all of this. So you should be good to select create campaign. All right, we're going to walk through this from start to finish every step of the way. So the first thing that you're going to want to do is name your campaign. Yes, I know that there's a default option here, but to be honest, you want to be very clear about your naming conventions. And this actually gets into one of the first strategy points that you should know when you're launching any campaigns, sponsored display included, is the fact that you want to make sure that you're only creating campaigns with a single product and a single strategy or a single type of targeting. Now, what do I mean by single product and types of targeting? So when we get down into the targeting section, I'll expand a little bit more on the options. In today's video, we're going to be launching a product targeting campaign. The reason why we're going to start with a product targeting campaign is, in our experience, out of all of the sponsored display ads that we've run, those are the ones that get the most universal results. They are also the ads that show most frequently underneath the buy box and description of competitors. And so we found that these, again, work the best for most ad accounts. There's definitely other targeting out there. There's retargeting ads, there's even audience ads. However, those oftentimes in accounts are a hit or miss. They're not bad testing points. I would definitely recommend testing them. However, we haven't seen that they universally work for all products. I'm not going to say that product targeting does, but in our experience, there is a more likelihood of these to work well for your products. And so it's a really good idea to start here. So when it comes to a single targeting, that's what I mean is like, are we running a product targeting ad? Are we doing a remarketing ad? You want to keep these things segmented. That is great practice in sort of any campaign. And the reason being is that your budget, whatever budget we put in this campaign, is going to apply to all of the targets in this campaign. And the reason why we want to segment these is each of these different types of targeting or these strategies are going to perform differently. And so by making sure that we have these segmented, we can make sure that we can set a specific budget on how much we want to spend on these strategies depending on how well they're working or not. Why do I cover that here in the campaign naming? It is because you want to make sure that you're putting that into your naming convention. So what I'm going to walk through is an example of a really good campaign name structure, and you can feel free to edit this in a way that makes sense for you and your brand. But what we found is that the best naming convention is going to have a product identifier. So in this instance, I'm just going to make something up. I'm saying we're advertising cups. And then often it is helpful to have the ASINs or whatever products you're going to be advertising in this. And we put dashes. Some people put pipes. It doesn't really matter. But we would like to specify what kind of ad type this is. So for us, this would be an SD campaign. And then we like to specify the targeting here. So for us, PT indicates product targeting. So now just by reading this first part, I say, hey, I know that this is a cup. I can search for the specific ASIN, or you could put the SKU, whatever makes most sense for you. I know this is a sponsored display product targeting ad. And then the other 2 points that we want to put on here is, where did we get these targets and what is our strategy around these targets? So an example would be, maybe we wanted to go after a specific competitor. And so I'm just going to say comp brand. So you might enter the brand name of the competitor right here or something along those lines. And then I would say we found these through Helium 10 or whatever wherever we've discovered these targets. And then the other thing that I like to put is the date range. This is a fantastic campaign structure, regardless if you're launching a sponsored product, sponsored brand, sponsored display ads, because just by reading this campaign name, I can quickly understand what the targeting is, what the ad type is, where I got these targets, and then my strategy surrounding them. That's all we have to do there. Now, your portfolio, you can select to put this campaign into a portfolio if you like. Oftentimes we won't. It just depends on your portfolio structure. The start date you can leave alone. I never put an end date on campaigns unless very specific circumstances, so I would leave that. And in terms of your daily budget, now here the recommendation from Amazon is going to be $100. I probably would not start out with $100. I would start out with somewhere between $10 and $20 is probably a good starting point. Now, when it comes to the ad group, again, I only ever recommend doing a single campaign, a single ad group, for the very same reason that I mentioned of segmenting targets. It's really important that you make sure your structure is really clean. And so I only ever recommend one ad group. And so in that case, because we only have one ad group, we put the exact same name on the ad group as we do the campaign. All right, here's where there are settings that you probably want to avoid and things that you should really, really understand. Now, here under optimization strategy, you can think of this like your bidding strategy inside of sponsored product campaigns. It's relatively similar. Here we have a couple options. We can optimize for reach, which makes this a VCPM campaign or a pay per impression. Now, if you're going to choose optimize for reach or the VCPM targeting, you absolutely 100% must understand how to correctly optimize these campaigns. If you do not understand how to optimize this type of ad correctly, I would completely steer away from VCPM and I wouldn't really run it at all. The reason being is that with VCPM campaigns, the shopper merely has to view the ad. They don't actually have to click through the ad into your product page and then go on to purchase. They can simply see it and then come back to purchase your product later, which oftentimes leads these ad types to seem like they're performing great. ROAS is fantastic, ACoS is fantastic. However, if you dig down even deeper into what orders have actually come from shoppers clicking through to the ad, oftentimes their performance just isn't that great. There is some wording going around that like, oh, VCPM, it has incorrect attributions and it's completely made up and all the orders are wrong. That's not actually true. There's two reports that you can actually pull. One is the campaign report or a bulk file to identify where actually click attributed sales are coming from, and you can optimize based on those click attributed orders and still use this ad type with confidence. But if you're not comfortable doing that, if you don't really know how to do those optimizations, I would completely stay away from this because you will end up overspending because you think the performance is actually better than it really is. So out of these other two ad types, the optimize for page visits and optimize for conversions, which do I recommend? As much as it would seem that you want to choose optimize for conversions, because who doesn't want higher conversions, what we have actually found is that optimize for page visits does a couple things. One is that it tends to have you get more visibility on those search pages because Amazon isn't sort of taking a look at the individual shopper and trying to identify if they will convert or not, and maybe potentially taking you out of the ad auction for those shoppers. So we want kind of maximum visibility. So I would choose page visits. The other thing is that inherently, you can't turn it off. It's by default. Sponsored display ads have a 300% dynamic up and down changes to your bids, just sort of built into the system. Now, the only way you would ever find this is if you read the documentation, which I have, and I'm sharing that with you. So you want to be very careful. And actually what we've seen is that optimize for page visits tends to trigger that bid increase a little bit less than optimize for conversion. So for that reason, we typically use optimize for page visits. Now going down to the next setting, here's another thing that seems amazing, and yet you probably want to avoid it, at least in the beginning, or if you know how to read the data or you know what you're doing. And so this is the cost control, which again, it is something that in theory sounds amazing, like optimize for views or the initial data that you might get off of a VCPM model. But in practice, we found that it just doesn't perform as well. And so for that reason, I would recommend unchecking this cost control metric. Now, if you believe that it would make sense for you, if you're really trying to control costs, I'm not saying you can't test this, but if you're starting out, just know that you can avoid this altogether. And to be honest, you're not going to be missing out on anything. Now, the other thing that you need to figure out is where you want the traffic going. So here you can either advertise products and drive directly to a detail page, or what you can do is you can choose to redirect to an Amazon store subpage and allow shoppers to sort of pick from whatever is on that subpage. Here's a couple things to keep in mind. If you wanted to keep it simple, and I recommend you do, simply choose the advertise products and driving to the detail page. That is the cleanest path to purchase for the shoppers. It does perform very well. If you want to test Amazon store pages, that is totally fine, but I would always recommend making sure you're directing to a stub page that includes the products that you're advertising. The worst thing you can ever do for a shopper is make them really interested in a product and then direct them to some place where they're unable to purchase that product. Trust me, as a consumer, that's really frustrating. The easiest way to avoid this is just directing them to the advertised products. Now, the other thing you can choose is, do you want to have images on these ads or do you want to have video? What I will say is that if you're going to do a video, make sure it is a really good video. You can't half-butt it. Don't do any slideshows. We've seen that images perform very well, and so I would be fine with just using static images. You can always create a couple different campaigns and test to see if images or if video converts better for your product. But again, the simplest way is going to be through the images. The other thing that you're going to need to do is choose the products to advertise. So all you'll have to do here is go in and select the products that you want to advertise in this campaign. Again, do keep in mind that when we chose the landing page or where shoppers are going to go and we chose the images, they're going to see the products that we add to this campaign. The other thing to keep in mind is you only ever want to advertise products that are on the same listing. Now, sometimes what we'll do is we will group products if there are variations on a specific listing. However, when choosing the products to advertise, if you have data, it's best to, again, only advertise and group products that are on a specific listing. And sometimes you even want to filter those variations even further to only advertise best sellers or the top 2 to maybe 3 best sellers, depending on how many variations you have. Now, let's get into our targeting. Amazon here gives you a ton of automatic targets here. So here we have contextual targeting, we have views remarketing, we have a lot of views remarketing, we have a lot of purchases remarketing. These are very interesting, but that's not what we're going to start with. Again, remember what I said, these can be really powerful tools to retarget shoppers that may have landed on your product pages but haven't gone on to purchase. Or if you have a repeat purchase product, you can always target shoppers who have purchased your product in longer date range. So maybe you have a product that people purchase annually or they have to resupply every 30 days. You can retarget those customers with sponsored display ads, which is super powerful. But also, like I said, it can work and maybe not work depending on your product. And there's a lot of testing that goes into it. And so I would recommend you start with product targeting. So to get to product targeting, you're going to have to click contextual targeting, and then you're going to have to go over to individual products. They've actually kind of hidden this a little bit. Now here you're going to see products that are suggested for you to target. So you can absolutely go through and select these products as well. And in your campaign name, specify that these are Amazon suggested products so you can get a feeling for like where you found these products and probably the strategy around them. But in one fantastic strategy is to identify your product targeting that is working really well in your sponsored product ads or potentially sponsored brand ads if you're using product targeting there, and then carry that over into your sponsored display campaigns. It gives you a separate place, so it's not going to compete with your sponsored product ads at all, but it is going to give you additional visibility on those competitor pages that you're already stealing market share from and simply capture even more of their market share, which is always fun. So here I'm going to add the products that Amazon suggests, but I can always go here and search by a product name if I want to pull up some additional products, which is pretty cool. I also can go here and you can enter your own own list, which is either separated by a space or a comma, and then simply click target and it will add these to your campaigns as well. As far as how many products to target, I would recommend keeping the list very specific. I would not recommend going through and saying, okay, I'm going to add a bunch of suggested Amazon targeting, and then I'm going to do competitor research, and here's all of these products that I'm already targeting and sponsored product ads. I'm simply going to add those to sponsored display ads. And oh wait, I did some other research and found some competitors I want to try going after, and have that all lumped in together. Because each of those targeting sets have maybe a little bit different goal. So with the ones that you went out and you want to conquest even further on, you're probably wanted to be a little bit more intentional there, where on Amazon suggested ones, you're like, oh, this seems like it could work. Let me try it, right? Those are kind of different strategies, different optimizations, different goals. And so you want to make sure that those things are separate. So I would recommend bucketing the products that you're targeting based on where you found them and where your goals are. Now, how many products you end up with in that process is probably going to be pretty refined. If I'm going through and I'm selecting specific competitors I want to conquest on, I might only have 10 or 20 of those, depending on how many products you have that are performing inside of your sponsored product ads. You might only have a small list. So I wouldn't worry so much about a specific number, more like making sure your sets are very curated and they're separated into specific campaigns so you can have more clarity on what you should be doing to optimize, again, based on your specific campaign goals. Now, when it comes to setting the bids, I would recommend either just using the suggested bids. Now, if the suggested bids are a little bit too high, you can always lower these and then start with a lower bid. And then depending on how many impressions you get, you can work your way up. One addition to Amazon's campaign launcher, which is insanely powerful, is this forecast. Now, this forecast here, it is a forecast, so it's not going to be 100%, but this does give you an idea. These impressions are going to be based on, one, how much traffic could potentially come from these targets, but then also how competitive your bids are, because the higher your bid is, the more competitive it is in the ad auction, the more likely you're going to be able to win placement, so the more impressions you're going to get. So again, depending on your goals, if you have a competitor that you're absolutely looking to dominate, you probably want to go a little bit higher onto bid spectrum. But if it's just a product that you're trying to test out, maybe you're okay with going lower and then seeing if you can get impressions and then working your way up. But again, you can also use this forecast to say, okay, at these bids, do I think I'm going to get any traction at all? It's not going to be exactly this many impressions, but it can kind of give you a gauge as to how competitive your bids would be in the ad auction. All right, almost there. So the very last thing that you can do is you can actually set a custom image or a lifestyle image for this ad type. So here what we're seeing is that Amazon is actually pulling in some suggested images for us. So you can simply select these images and it will be added to your ad set. Now, here we can see that these images aren't exactly proportioned. So we're able to sort of crop and just make sure wherever we're selecting on the image is going to make sense for the product. So here you could see our images. If you want to create your own image, you can see the image specs right here. Now you aren't required to select a image. You can always turn this off, but it's a good idea to select a lifestyle image because it just looks really clean on the page. The other thing that you can add to your advertising is a logo. Now, honestly, unless you have a recognized brand, it just kind of takes up space that is better used for your product images. So I would recommend just to leave that alone. And then again, depending on how good of a lifestyle image you actually have, you might want to opt to only have the product shown and displayed here. Now, the other thing and the last creative option that you have is a headline. And here, Amazon actually gives you some suggestions. Now, if you decide that you want to add a headline, you definitely want to make sure that you're using this space well. You can also view messaging guidelines because you can't do things like all caps or random capitalizations or like a click here, click me. They're not looking for that sort of experience. But if there's anything that you want to call out about your product that is maybe different, so maybe you have a more premium construction, maybe maybe your product has a different color that is interesting, and multiple colors or other things. You can call that out in your headline. Again, I would recommend reading their guidelines as well. And the other thing, again, to be aware is when it comes to choosing the headlines, notice that this actually takes up space and takes away from the image. So make sure if you are going to choose adding a headline, it's not any wasted space. Honestly, the easiest thing that you can do is simply say, hey, let's show the product image. You're also going to show the headline and the star ratings, and oftentimes it shows price points as well. And so in these cases, you've done a lot of work on your main image, or you should have, and your title, so you can just let those speak for themselves. You can always go back and customize your ads or change this by adding an image, adding a headline, if you decide that maybe you get better creatives in the future. And that is it. The last thing to do is simply to click launch campaign. Now, as soon as this campaign is launched and it is active, it will have to go through an approval process just because it has creatives assigned to it. And so Amazon wants to make sure that you haven't put a headline or you haven't put an image that's against their terms of service, but providing everything is good, it should go through and should become active very shortly, and you will be able to see that in the ad console. So now that you know how to launch a sponsored display campaign, I highly recommend you go into your ad account and get these set up today, because they are one of the most powerful, very underutilized tools in Amazon advertising. And if you have more questions about how many keywords you should put into a campaign, definitely recommend checking out this video.